Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and we're going to get into some GM news that happened yesterday on Saturday. We're also going to talk about the 6 coaches that the Las Vegas Raiders ended up firing, and, that's one of the things that's expected when you decide to name a new head coach. I know what Antonio Pierce was as the interim, but when you bring in a new head coach, certain things are going to happen, and a lot of the coaches that were relieved of their duties were McDaniels guys. So to be honest, I'm not all that surprised about it. So what's going to be coming up here on today's show is we're going to get into the latest GM news. We're going to talk about Ed Dodds, Champ Kelly, and according to reports, there's still 2 people that could potentially get a job to be a GM. However, I think it's going to be another role that we've discussed probably over the last month here on this show. Then we'll get into all the coaches that were ended up and getting fired, and then some news from Schefter and when he thinks the Raiders are going to announce that they're going to be hiring a GM. If you're always looking for news, rumors around the Las Vegas Raiders, make sure you guys click that subscribe button. I'm going to do my best to keep you guys up to date. On Friday was my off day, so when I came into the studio, we went wet and wild, shouting out Antonio Pierce. So yesterday, I wasn't able to do as much Raiders content. My fiance, Alex, her sister, it was her birthday, so I had to spend some time with the fam. So when I woke up bright and early this morning, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to get the nation a video out today. So it's a lot of it is just in case maybe you missed some of the news and updates and whatnot over the past 24 hours. So let's first get here into, Mitch, when the hell are the Raiders going to hire a general manager? I don't know about you, but I've been kind of sitting around waiting for the news, and it was reported that Las Vegas would end up hiring a GM before they ended up hiring a head coach. It didn't quite go that way, but believe me, I'm not upset about it at all. I think AP was absolutely the right hire, and if you agree, let's get some APs down below. To me, right now, what it sounds like, it's not that there's like a snag. It just sounds like there's a little bit more division amongst people who make the important decisions for the Raiders in terms of who's going to be the GM. It sounded like they were 100% sold on Antonio Pierce, and that was the direction that they went in. But now with the latest here around Ed Dodds and Champ Kelly, they are still the front runners to be the Raiders GM. But there's also a possibility, and it's been reported, that the Raiders could bring in both of them. I don't know if it would be Ed Dodds as the GM and then Champ Kelly as like the assistant GM, or would it be Champ Kelly as the GM and Ed Dodds as the assistant GM? But what's kind of funny about this whole idea is, I'm going to say back on December, 19th, this is early, middle December type of area, I made a video stating that I was told by a source that the Raiders were thinking about bringing in this assistant GM, creating a brand new style of role just to really help build that front office and just have, a little bit more cooks in the kitchen, because what's really shot the Raiders in the foot is you've had one person, whether that be John Gruden or Josh McDaniels, calling all the shots, and that's just not how good businesses run. It's not how good anything runs, right? It's got to be a democracy. The more voices you have, the more people kind of weighing in, and then sure, you can have somebody be the deciding factor, which is always going to be Mark Davis, but you have to have that ability to hold those conversations. So this is a report from The Athletic. I'm going to read it to you. I'll give you my 2 cents on it. Kelly still has a chance to get the job, but there's a split camp with the Raiders hiring committee, according to a team source with knowledge of the situation. It's unclear when the split occurred, but the Raiders' 2 top candidates are believed to be Champ Kelly and Indianapolis Colts assistant GM Ed Dodds. Not authorized to speak publicly about the situation is the source here in this whole thing from The Athletic. However, though, former Los Angeles Chargers GM Tom Telesco and Cincinnati Bengals senior personnel executive Trey Brown are still in the mix. So what I hear in that is what the Raiders' plan A is they're going to try to bring in Ed Dodds and Champ Kelly, both of them. One of them is going to be the main man GM. The other one's going to be the assistant GM. But there's going to be an open conversation, and they're trying to build this front office juggernaut, which I absolutely love. To me, though, if let's just say they're unable to lock in an Ed Dodds, or if they're unable to lock in a Champ Kelly, then they could potentially look at Tom Telesco from the Chargers. I wouldn't recommend that. Or Trey Brown, which this was the move that I thought that the Raiders were going to do when I spoke about it back in December. To me, the plan that I thought that they were going to do is they were going to hire Champ Kelly. He was going to be the GM, and then they were going to bring in Trey Brown, who's interviewed for the Raiders GM job in 2019, 2022. He's a young guy, 38 years old, but he's very well respected in the talent evaluation process, especially in the draft. So to me, what I see here is plan A. Looks like it's Ed Dodds and Champ Kelly. If you can get both of those guys in, that's a hell of a front office. Those two people are very, very well respected. If one of those guys doesn't end up sticking around, well, then you could do that exact same thing, but you're going to bring in a Trey Brown or you're going to bring in a Tom Telesco. Bottom line is, though, I really like what the Raiders are doing here with this GM search. It sounds like they're crossing all their T's, they're dotting their I's, and they're going through this process in the correct way. What's really interesting, though, is just because the way that Mark Davis kind of handles his day-to-day is there's certain people that Mark trusts more than others. And, we have those people in our lives. And one of the people that Davis does really trust here is Ken Heyward. And he was the biggest guy that got the Raiders to hire Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. And I know when people hear that, they're like, crap, pump the brakes. I personally didn't like the fact that the Raiders listened to Heyward last year, but it is what it is. It does sound like, though, this year Heyward is really, really pushing for Ed Dodds to be the GM. And since he was the guy that Mark Davis listened to last year, that's obviously weighing heavily on Mark, but also just because of how big of a flop and fail it was bringing in Ziegler and McDaniels. I'm curious to see what the Raiders decide to do at the GM spot. But the bottom line is this. It does sound like that they're doing the right things at GM. So, again, shout out to Mark Davis for listening up. All right, my question down there below is this. Who are you hoping is the Raiders GM? Who are you hoping that it is? Because you can go a lot of different directions here. If you want Ed Dodds, if you want Champ Kelly, you guys are going to get hit with a YouTube ad break here, and then I'm going to give you my answer right now. My answer here on this is I want both of them, and I'm going to continue to stick to this plan. I released a video a while ago that said my Raiders' perfect off-season plan, and in my Raiders' perfect off-season plan, I didn't have Ed Dodds or Champ Kelly, but what I did have was a GM, and what I ended up having was Marvin Lewis, who the Raiders have already brought in, and then I also had this secondary GM special advisor type of role for whoever they end up bringing in. At the time, I said, Trey Brown would be a very intriguing name on top of that, but if the Raiders end up getting two out of the Ed Dodds, Champ Kelly, Trey Brown train, I think that this is an absolute slam dunk by Mark Davis and his team. Coming up next here on the show is we're going to get into some coaches that were fired. And, it's not too, crazy that they moved on from a lot of these guys. I think most of them were expected. But I do got to tell you about our sponsor today, Prize Picks, and I love doing Prize Picks. I think anytime that you have playoff football and the Raiders aren't playing, you can put down 10, 20 bucks. Have a chance to win up to 25 times your money. It's super easy. There's a reason why Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app in the world right now. And all you got to do is choose more or less on some players. All you got to do is pick 2+ players, and I'm telling you what, you're going to really enjoy yourself. It's quick withdrawals, easy gameplay. You can do football, basketball, whatever sport you want to end up going with. If you're planning on watching any playoff football games today, download the Prize Picks app. I'm telling you right now, you're going to have a hell of a time. So it's prizepicks.com/CLNS, and make sure that you use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. All right, so let's get in now to some of these coaches that were fired. Bo Hardagree, this one, the Raiders interim OC, quarterback coach, not surprised at all, but this is I'm really, really curious where the Raiders go next here with this one, because I think this is I don't want to say one of the make or break hirings, but it could be one of the make or break hirings, right? You got to be able to find your quarterback. You obviously want to bring in a good quarterbacks coach, and I think what they're going to end up doing is they're going to bring in an OC, they're going to bring in a quarterback coach. They're not going to probably try to do one of the same role. Yeah, I know that right now the front runner, it sounds like it's Cliff Kingsbury, who has been a head coach, he's been an OC, he's been a quarterback coach, but to me, I think you bring in an OC and you bring in a QB coach. Jerry Schuplinksi, the tight end coach, he's no longer around. Matt Lombardi, the assistant wide receiver analyst. Matt Edwards, pass rush specialist, defensive tackle coach, which I know a lot of y'all, when this one happened, were kind of surprised about it. I'm going to tell you who I personally think would be a good addition here to be able to replace Matt Edwards. I'll do that here in a little bit. Chris Ash, the co-DB coach. Again, that was a big-time McDaniels hire. And then Keith Heyward, defensive quality control. But he actually got a job at Oregon State, and sometimes these coaches are going to take other opportunities, just like Carmen Brasillo did. Brasillo left, about a week and a half ago at this point. So to me, when you look at a lot of those coaches a lot of those were McDaniels guys, right? And at the end of the day, if you're going to move on from Josh McDaniels, I think you got to be able to have the idea of, okay, we're going to have to bring in a bunch of new people from the offensive side of the football, and it's exactly what they should have done. What I'm curious, though, for Matt Edwards, pass rush specialist, defensive tackle coach, you obviously know how I feel about Rob Leonard. Rob Leonard, the Raiders D-line coach, is one of my favorite coaches that they brought in. I was super excited about the hire. But one of the names that I'd be really intrigued by, and just because the way that the Raiders have kind of ran this entire situation, it's because, they've been listening to Max Crosby, they've been listening to a lot of their players, and when I hear a lot of that stuff, I go, okay, well, one of the guys who used to coach here for the Raiders, and he was the Raiders D-line coach back in 2019, and it was Max Crosby's rookie season, and to be honest, it was probably one of the better years that the Raiders had coming off of one of their worst seasons, but it's Brenton Buckner, and Buckner was just relieved of his duties by the Jacksonville Jaguars, so he's available to come in here. Like, if I'm the Raiders and I'm going to listen to what Max Crosby did, and I'm going to listen to a lot of these players and, really going to pound on the table and say, hey, like, we want to be able to build a good group, I think Buckner would be a very intriguing option to come in here and be that defensive tackle coach, to be able to come in and replace Matt Edwards, pass rush specialist. Max will vote for him. And the last time that the Raiders had him, it was by far their best season because the year before, I want to say they had 13 sacks, and the next year they had 32, right? Like, that's a massive upgrade. And even this past year, there was a massive upgrade for that Raiders defense. So those are the coaches that were let go. Obviously, if there's any more hirings here, I don't know if it's going to happen. Like, you got to hire a GM in my book before you can start hiring these other coaches. But then again, we'll see what the Raiders end up doing. If they do anything, you already know I'll be dropping a video here. And then we're going to get into next is going to be some of the coaches that are still on the team because there are still plenty of them. But for those that do not know, I am going to be live today with Jeremy Chuggs. We're going to be doing the Chiefs and Bills game, which, F the Niners, man. I feel so bad for Daniel Carlson's brother. He's the kicker for the Packers, Anders, and that field goal that he missed, that was a backbreaker. When he missed that 41-yarder yesterday, it just felt like the freaking Niners are really going to pull this one out, aren't they? So Niners got the dub. The Ravens got the dub, which that means both number one seeds advance. I really want the Buffalo Bills to win this football game. I would absolutely love a little Bills-Ravens action in the AFC Championship game, but I will be live today an hour before kickoff with Chuggs, so make sure you're subscribed, make sure you got those noties on. We're going to be having a hell of a time, and I got a really cool giveaway item to do. All right, y'all, let's get in now to the final thing here, which is the remaining coaches still available or still on the team. Antonio Pierce, head coach. Patrick Graham, DC. Just because I say Patrick Graham is still on the team does not mean that is officially official that he's going to stay. If there's a team that's willing to offer him a head coaching gig, I imagine he takes it. I would be shocked that if he took another job that was a defensive coordinator role because I know he wants to stay here and how much he's talked about, how much he's loved coaching these players. So unless he gets a head coaching job, I do believe that Patrick Graham's going to be back at DC. Kennedy Polamalu at halfback coach still on the board, which very well-respected guy, came over from Minnesota. The fact that they ended up keeping him does make me wonder if they're going to keep Jacobs or not, because Jacobs said that he's on board. It's just going to come down to the money because he's a free agent. Edgar Bennett, wide receiver coach. This one does not surprise me at all. Bennett has been a part of the Raiders for a very, very, very long time. He's the longest tenured coach there for the Raiders. Next guy is Cameron Clemmons, the assistant O-line coach. This one might end up changing just because the Raiders don't have an O-line coach as it stands right now. Carmen Brasillo took that job with the New York Giants, so I think for the Raiders, you're like, all right, if we can't bring in another dude, maybe we'll just end up sticking here with Clemmons. Scott Turner, pass game coordinator. Mitch Singer, offensive quality control. Rob Ryan, and, when you see a lot of these coaches, again, if I'm going to bring in my OC, let's say it's a Cliff Kingsbury, I'm going to let him make probably final decision on a lot of these coaches on the offensive side of the football. I think the guys that they moved on from were just the clear as day Josh McDaniels guys. Now this is where I do get excited. Like, you got to be able to keep Rob Ryan, defensive assistant. Jason Simmons, keeping him as your DB coach. That's a really, really big one. Matt Feeney for the defensive quality. Tom McMahon, special teams, which wasn't that big of a fan of McMahon. And this could be another move that I wouldn't be shocked if the Raiders decide to move on from him, because McMahon and McDaniels, they went way back from their older previous coaching days, so special teams could still be up in the air. I had some people ask me, Mitch, do you think that the Raiders could end up bringing in Bisaccia? I think Bisaccia is going to stay where he's at in Green Bay. They got something pretty special there. Darius Swinton, the assistant special teams. Danny Amendola, returners. I know when you hear that name, a lot of y'all think Patriots. However, Amendola and Tom Brady are like this, so I don't anticipate that he's going to be going anywhere. And I think I actually skipped over Rob Leonard, who's probably my favorite coach that they have on that defensive side at the defensive line spot. So those are still all the coaches. A lot of stuff, though, can end up changing. All right, y'all, before I get on out of here, all I see right now is nothing really going on around the Raiders bright and early this morning, but I did want to be able to provide a little bit of an update here around the silver and black. If you guys ever want any more news, updates, you already know you can hit me up on IG. You can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at MitchellRens365, trying to drop a lot more videos over there as well. But I will see you guys later for a little Bills-Chiefs action. Let's get some FKCs if you made it this far in the video. For more videos here around the Las Vegas Raiders, make sure you guys click the subscribe button right here. Then if you're looking for even more content, Chuck, my dog, loves these videos. I definitely recommend these. Like when I go away, I play the Raiders Report in the background. He watches those. Other videos, though, if you're looking for even more content. So Raiders content, make sure you guys are subscribed.